The day after the divorce, she checked into a cheap motel with her baby, unaware the man next door was a lonely millionaire. It was raining hard the day Emma pulled into the cracked parking lot of the roadside motel, the windshield wipers barely keeping up with the downpour. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel as her baby, Lily, let out a tired cry from the back seat. Emma turned off the ignition, stared through the foggy glass for a moment, and then whispered to herself, "We'll figure this out. Somehow." It had only been 24 hours since the divorce was finalized. A courtroom, a signature, and the last shred of what she once thought was her forever love, gone. Her ex-husband had left her with a suitcase, a few $100s, and their 11-month-old daughter. No family nearby, no friends close enough to crash with, and no real plan. The motel was the only place she could afford that didn't ask too many questions. Room 6 was damp and smelled faintly of mildew, but it had a lock on the door, and right now, that was enough. She placed Lily on the creaky bed and rummaged through her bag for the last can of formula. She had skipped lunch, trying to make the baby food last longer, but Emma didn't complain. Her hunger didn't matter anymore, only Lily did. Next door, in room 7, Michael Whitmore sat alone, staring at the muted television that flickered shadows across the walls. At 62, he was a man who had everything money could buy, properties, cars, stocks, but nothing money couldn't. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier. Since then, the silence of his mansion had become unbearable, and he often wandered aimlessly, booking random nights at roadside motels just to feel something different, even if it was loneliness in a new location. Through the paper-thin wall, he could hear the baby crying again. At first, he was irritated. It was supposed to be a quiet night, but then, he heard something else. A soft voice, trembling but loving. A lullaby. The mother was singing, off-key but tender, her voice raw with exhaustion. It stirred something in Michael's chest he hadn't felt in years. He couldn't help but press his ear closer to the wall. That night, Emma sat on the floor next to the bed, her baby finally asleep, and cried into her hands. She didn't notice the knock at first. It came again, soft, hesitant. Wiping her tears quickly, she opened the door a few inches, wary. An older man with kind eyes and a weathered coat stood there, holding 2 steaming takeout containers. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I heard your baby crying. I thought, maybe you could use a warm meal." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't want pity. But then she looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully, and her stomach growled in betrayal. "Thank you," she whispered, opening the door a bit more. They sat together on the floor, a strange pair, one broken by love's ending, the other by love's absence. Michael didn't ask many questions, and Emma didn't offer much. But in that small, dingy motel room, they shared a quiet understanding. 2 strangers bound by invisible threads of grief and hope. The next morning, Michael was gone. Emma assumed it was just a random act of kindness and prepared to move on. But when she stepped out, she found a note taped to her door. "If you're willing, meet me at the diner across the street tomorrow morning. I have an idea." Something told her to go. At the diner, over pancakes and orange juice, Michael asked her to tell him her story. This time, she did. She told him about the dreams she once had, of being a nurse, of opening a small clinic in a community that needed it. She talked about how life had rerouted her plans through marriage, then motherhood, then abandonment. She confessed she didn't know what came next. Michael listened quietly, nodding, his hands folded on the table. "I have more money than I'll ever spend," he said finally. "But I don't have purpose anymore. Not since my wife died. She was a nurse, too. Always said the world needed more people like her. I think she would have liked you." Emma blinked, unsure where this was going. "I want to help you. Go back to school. Get on your feet. Build the life you deserve, not just for you, but for Lily too." Emma stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that for someone you barely know? Michael smiled, eyes misty. Because once, someone did it for me. And I never got the chance to pay it forward, until now. The next few months were a blur. Emma enrolled in nursing classes with Michael's support. He didn't just give her money, he gave her guidance, babysat Lily when needed, showed up to her exams with packed lunches, and never made her feel like a burden. They became something like family. Years later, Emma stood at her nursing school graduation, Lily now a giggling 5-year-old in a tiny white dress, sitting on Michael's lap. Cameras flashed, applause thundered, but the real moment came after the ceremony when Emma turned to him, eyes shining. "You saved me," she said. Michael chuckled. "No, Emma. You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was possible." And so, from a cheap motel room soaked in rain and sadness, began a story not of charity, but of connection. Of how one act of kindness from a stranger in the dark can spark a future full of light. In a world that often feels cold and disconnected, this story reminds us, sometimes, the right people come into your life at the wrong moment just to show you how strong you really are. And that love, true love, doesn't always start with romance. Sometimes, it begins with a knock on the door, and a warm meal shared between two broken hearts.